Here's a great example of how the predict the question strategy can really help us when there seems like there's a lot of things to consider and a lot of maybe some traps here. So what is this question testing? We can see that the answer choices are very similar. But if we focus on the differences, we notice that it's a lot of S's, right? Some things like causes versus cause, limit versus limits. And those S's are important. They tell me that if I'm trying to predict what they're testing, I can pretty confidently say that this is about verb agreement. Not really about tense. I know that tense might matter at some point because of the word has there, right? That's a different tense. But when we have verbs changing in the choices, the first thing we want to think about usually is agreement, singulars and plurals. If that doesn't help, we can always go back to tense, but most of the time it does help. So let's look at what we have here. We have to remember that in English, singular verbs have the S. It's kind of the opposite of what we normally expect. We associate the letter S with plurals, but singular verbs end in S. So why is that important? Well, that means that choice A is singular. So let's put that there, right? We've got causes and limits. B, though, is plural. Cause and limit. Those two don't have S's, so those two are plural. C does something very bad. It mixes and matches here, right? We've got cause, which is plural, but limits, which is singular. There's no reason we would ever do that because both of those verbs are, talking about the same thing. I don't know what the thing is yet, but the structure of that sentence is it's one thing doing two actions. So this just doesn't make any sense. And then D, also singular. Has is an irregular verb, but it doesn't break this rule. It still follows this rule. Has is singular. The plural version would be have, just to put it up there. Have equals plural. So, why does that help me? Well, obviously, I can just play by the rules now and try to follow it, and what I'm looking for is the subject of the verb, what is doing the action, and that will tell me whether I need a singular or plural. If the subject is singular, I need a singular verb. If it's plural, I need a plural verb. Now we could cheat a little bit, though, because this is a hard question. If I'm looking at this, and I've got two singular choices and one plural choice, and I had no idea how to find the right one, my bet would be on B, because it's the odd man out, right? One plural, two singular choices. If the answer was really singular, it would be hard to know whether I need the singular with the word causes or the singular with has caused. That would be harder to choose because most of the way that we choose tense on the SAT is just by singulars and plurals first, and then the right tense kind of pops out. So if I were purely guessing, the best guess here would be B. Ideally, though, you memorize how this rule works and you can prove it. The challenge is they're working against you here. This question is set up to trick you because what they want you to see is that, this is the trap, I'm going to do it in a different color here. The trap is that density is singular, right? It's not densities. It's one density, I guess. And the density causes uneven heat flow and limits the size of the droplets. That's the trap. We match the singular with the two singulars. But it's not density. It's variations, which is indeed plural. The variations cause uneven heat flow and limit the size of the droplets. Now, why is it variations? Well, it has to do with a very grammatical kind of heavy thing. The verb agreement rule, in my opinion, is the most grammar heavy rule on the SAT. There's just like a lot of little annoying things. In this case, the one that matters is that the word in is a preposition, and that means that that little part there, in density, is a prepositional phrase. Prepositional phrase. And the reason that's important is a prepositional phrase is extra stuff. That's helpful for us to understand the content of the sentence, but grammatically speaking, it's not part of the sentence. It's an extra little clause. And so in order for something to be a sentence, it must have a subject and a verb. And so that means that if we could remove this, if we could omit it from the sentence, it can't be the subject. The subject cannot be removed from the sentence. It's part of it. It's part of the core of the sentence. So what is the main core here? Well, it's a little tricky because we also have a subject-verb pair at the beginning. This deformation results. Well, it starts over here. In subtle variations that both cause uneven heat flow and limit the size of the droplets. That's like the main short version of this subject-verb pairing here. And so that part in density is helpful information, but grammatically it could be skipped over. It's not part of the main sentence, and so it cannot contain the subject. And that's why variations ends up being the word that matters. This is tricky. It's a tricky rule in a tricky situation, and you're nearing the end of the test, so you probably don't have that much time left anyway to really dive through this. This is why you can practice. Khan Academy does have stuff about this. My study guide does have stuff about verb agreement. It's really a tough rule, but the good news is if you can get it down, especially this prepositional phrase thing, it's going to lock in some hard points that most other people are going to miss when they try to do stuff like this. So it's a good place to kind of put in some effort and learn a rule and make yourself stand out. Hopefully that helped, and yeah. It's mean. But there we go. As we saw when I said we could bet on the answer, there are other ways of kind of outsmarting the SAT a little bit here. They don't always work. They're not as reliable as just memorizing the rule. But in a pinch, it could still get you some points. And, you know, it's better than not guessing at all and leaving it blank. Never leave it blank.